Okay, next we're gonna move to item 3, traffic calming on Oriole Court, Mimosa Drive, Moorhen Place, and Dove Lane.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm pleased to introduce Miriam Jim. She's our new senior engineer. She was hired before the pandemic and brought aboard right after. So it's been a unique time to bring aboard a new employee, but we're really excited to have her aboard. And her and Associate Engineer Lindy Pham will be presenting this next item.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, and everyone. I'm Miriam Jim. Nice to meet you all virtually, and hopefully I'll meet you in person sometime in the future. And today, this afternoon with me is Lindy Pham, Associate Engineer. We'll be presenting to you item number 3, traffic calming project on Oriole Court, Mimosa Drive, Moorhen Place, and Dove Lane. Just want to give you a background on this project. In November 2019, city staff conducted a traffic study to evaluate the potential traffic effects by the Poinsettia Lane Gap Closure Project on the surrounding roadway system and identify potential cut-through traffic in nearby neighborhoods.
Excuse me, Miriam.
Yes?
Sorry, can you share your screen, please?
Oh, sorry. I forgot to share my screen. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can you see me? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so to give you some background on this project, in November 2019, city staff conducted a traffic analysis to evaluate the potential traffic impact by the Poinsettia Lane Gap Closure Project on the surrounding roadway system and identify potential cut-through traffic in nearby neighborhoods. A public meeting was held on November 21st, 2019 to discuss the findings of this traffic analysis. And this traffic study was also presented to Traffic and Mobility Commission on December 2nd, 2019. A neighborhood meeting was then held on January 23rd, 2020 to discuss traffic calming specifically on Oriole Court, Mimosa Drive, Moorhen Place, and Dove Lane based on the findings from the traffic study. And based on the residents' feedback received from this particular neighborhood meeting, a second neighborhood meeting was held on February 20th, 2020 to further discuss traffic calming on Mimosa Drive between Moorhen Place and Aviera Parkway. Traffic calming is proposed to discourage cut-through traffic on these residential streets. This slide shows you a vicinity map. You can see the Poinsettia Lane Gap Closure Project is shown in yellow right here. It's to fill the gap on Poinsettia Lane between Cassia Road and Simmer Court. And the roadways shown in red are the residential street included in this project. This map presents to you a closer look of the project area as well as the potential cut-through routes upon the completion of the Poinsettia Lane Gap Closure Project. Cut-through traffic occurs where local streets provide time savings compared to remaining on their arterial network. And there are two potential cut-through routes of concerns in this neighborhood. First is Oriole Court, Mimosa Drive, Moorhen Place, and Dove Lane as potential cut-through routes for traffic west of Poinsettia Lane to and from the shopping center and the post office. The second cut-through routes of concern is Oriole Court and Mimosa Drive for traffic from the west on Poinsettia Lane to and from Aviera Parkway. For this particular traffic calming project, City is taking a very proactive approach with the intent to discourage future cut-through traffic and reduce the potential traffic impact to this neighborhood with the gap closure project. City of Carlsbad adopted a Carlsbad Residential Traffic Calming Program, CRTMP, in 2011 to minimize excessive speed and high volumes in neighborhoods through traffic calming. And this is a three-phase program. Phase 1 is to utilize enforcement and education to address speeding on neighborhood streets. Phase 2 is to implement cost-effective traffic calming measures to reduce speed on neighborhood streets, thus discourage cut-through traffic. And phase 3 is to implement comprehensive traditional traffic calming measures. This phase would only be considered if cost-effective measures in phase 2 were deemed ineffective. There are a few criteria for implementation of phase 2 traffic calming measures. The CRTMP established 32 miles per hour as the threshold for critical speed on residential streets. However, I want to note that exception may be approved by Traffic and Mobility Commission. CRTMP also placed high priority on community support for phase 2 measures. Staff will hold neighborhood meetings to present the concern data collected in traffic calming concept plans to residents in the neighborhoods. Surveys will then be mailed out to the residents to gauge community support. A minimum of 50% return rate and a 67% support rate from the return survey are required to move the plan forward. With this background presented, I'll hand it over to Lindy Pham. She will present the details and the preferred traffic calming concept plans on these residential streets.
Good evening, Commissioners. Again, my name is Lindy Pham. I'm an Associate Engineer with the Traffic and Mobility Department. I'll be presenting the data for this project. So back in 2019, staff have deployed a portable speed feedback sign to measure speed on Oriole Court and Mimosa Drive. And the critical speed that was measured on Oriole Court is 25 miles per hour, and for Mimosa Drive is 27 miles per hour. So both of these streets are measured below the 32 miles per hour that are required for phase 2. As Mariam mentioned, for streets that do not meet the eligibility criteria, the CRTMP allow exception to the program if approved by the Traffic and Mobility Commission. So to gauge community support for traffic calming on these streets, we held 2 neighborhood meetings. The first one was in January 23rd, 2020, a couple months ago. And that meeting was focused on Oriole Court to Dove Lane. And there were 22 meeting attendees, and the meeting was held at Algo Norte Community Center. And the second meeting was held on February 20th, also this year, 2020. And this meeting focused on Mimosa Drive from Moorhen Place to Aviara Parkway. And there were 13 meeting attendees. At these meetings, we presented the CRTMP program and discussed traffic calming strategies, and also received feedbacks from residents on the traffic calming plan that staff developed to address the concern. After the meeting, a letter was sent out to residents that has proposed feature in front of their homes to provide an opportunity for them to provide any additional comments they may have before we finalize the plan. 2 features that we propose are speed cushions and curb extension. Here's an example of speed cushion on Corinthia Street. So the speed cushion span across the roadway, and it's approximately 12 feet wide. And in the center, it has a wheel path for emergency vehicle to go through without any deflection. It has a parabolic cross section with the highest maximum vertical height at approximately 3.5 inches. For speed cushion, they can be placed anywhere on the roadway, but by practice, we don't place it in front of driveways or at intersections. But if we do, we don't restrict any access into those facilities. The next feature are curb extension, which is also known as curb vaults out. There are a lot of them in Bressy Ranch area. So for curb extension, basically it's extending the curb line into the parking lane, reducing the roadway width for residential street is 40 feet wide. So we're reducing it into 24 feet. What it does is it tightens the intersection radii to encourage slower turning speed. And it also reduces the crossing distance for pedestrians. So the pedestrian, instead of crossing for have to cross 40 feet, they will only have to cross 24 feet. And the 24 feet allows 12 feet lane for vehicle lane to go in each direction. Because it impacts parking at these intersections or adjacent to these intersections, we have also notified the resident adjacent to these curb extension. And here is the traffic calming plan for Oriole Court to Dove Lane. It includes a 3-speed cushion, one on Oriole Court, the other one on Moorhen Place and Dove Lane. And the curb extension are proposed at the intersection of Oriole Court and Mimosa Drive and Moorhen Place. For Mimosa Drive, south of Moorhen Place, we are proposing 4-speed cushions. They're spaced about 290 feet to 520 feet. So after we receive comments from the resident, we finalize these plans and sent out surveys. As Mary mentioned earlier, in order for the survey to be considered valid, 50% of the survey that's sent out must be returned. And out of those 50% survey, 67% need to be supporting the traffic calming plans to meet the criteria of the CRTMP. So for the first project from Oriole Court to Dove Lane, 52 survey was sent out and 29 was returned, and that's a 59% return rate. And out of the 29 survey that was returned, 25 was in support of the traffic calming plan, and that's 86% support rate. For Mimosa Drive, we sent out 115 surveys. Out of those, 65% was returned, and that is 57% return rate. And out of the 65 survey, 53 was in support of the project, and that's an 82% support rate. So both of these projects met the support criteria specified in the CRTMP. So on May 20th, we sent out letter to the resident informing them of the survey result and the Traffic and Mobility Commission date. Based on the result of the public engagement process, including neighborhood surveys for the proposed traffic calming plans, staff recommend that the Traffic and Mobility Commission approve an exception to the CRTMP and support the proposed traffic calming plan for Oriole Court, Mimosa Drive, Moorhen Place, and Dove Lane. This concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cindy and Miriam, for the presentation. Do I have any commissioners that have questions or comments? Okay, so I see 3. Okay, hold on, let me make sure that I don't have any on the other side. Okay. So let's start with Commissioner Fowler.
Yeah, I went by there actually within the last week. And first of all, I want to thank our employees of Carlsbad for diligently wearing masks wherever they go. And I was reminded by that watching an employee in a Carlsbad truck alone wearing a mask. And I had a conversation with some friend of mine who said, isn't it idiotic for people to wear masks when they're in the car or a truck alone? And, you know, I didn't think about it, but I guess it is kind of ridiculous. But obviously there's a recommendation or a requirement by the city to wear them. And I think that's really good. And I will note in passing, I noticed 5 people walking the streets in this area on one of those streets, and none of them were wearing masks. So I don't know what to make of it. It won't affect my vote on this. But I do want to remind everyone that we have identified ourselves as a data-driven decision. We have data-driven decision process, or we rely on data to drive our decisions. And this is a case in which we have no data because the streets are not operational. And so that in addition to the fact that there has to be an exception by the normal rules that this be implemented, and we have to approve the exception. And the exception seems to be that the staff wants to be proactive. but it's not data driven. Obviously, it's not data driven. So I guess my question would be, how did you arrive at the idea that it would be good to do this? I mean, and it doesn't seem to me an obvious pathway, by the way. It's not straight through. You have to kind of jog around to it. And so what sorts of analysis have you done to provide data that there would likely to be cut-throughs, for example? So that would be one way that we might consider data to think about the exception in this case, or in fact, yeah, the exception in this case.
I can answer that question, Commissioner. The poinsettia traffic analysis, which was presented to the Traffic and Mobility Commission, I don't recall what that date was, but Lindy gave it. That analysis included, based on the concerns that the residents had of this new project, potential for cut-through. And these streets that we've listed here were identified as potential cut-through routes based on ideal travel times on residential streets versus the arterial surrounding it, and approximate signal delays. And based on their analysis, there is a cost savings that a traveler could incur by traveling on these residential streets, and therefore it was highlighted in the traffic analysis that Oriole Court, Mimosa Drive, Moorhen Place, and Dove Lane could be a potential cut-through, and council directed staff to use the CRTMP to proactively pursue traffic calming, and that's why we're presenting this as a proposed project.
So does that mean that regardless of what the conclusions were, that since you're directed to do this, this was a decision by City Council, not based on data?
Well, based on the analysis provided to City Council, which identified this as a potential cut-through, and Council's direction or wishes to see this proactively implemented, as opposed to waiting for the issue to occur.
Well, or waiting for data to verify that, you know. So when you did the analysis, and forgive me if I don't recall the specific presentation in which this was brought forth, when you make an assessment like that, do you calculate probabilities, or do you have an idea? How do you evaluate that? Is it probability based, that there's a certain probability that there will be an issue, or what degree of confidence do you have that that actually will out as a problem that would otherwise be identified? And I point out that if you notify members of the community that somebody is concerned about this, of course they're going to be concerned about this, right? Even though it's not data-based per se. So what's your feeling on that?
I think the community was brought in because traffic calming is often a quality of life issue. No probabilities were assigned to the potential for cut through. It is something that is yet to happen, if it were to happen at all. But based on engineering practices, we know that if a time savings can be had by taking a certain route, it is highly possible that drivers will find that route and start using it because there is a time savings. It's all about time. And so if that's the case, the engineering analysis simply says there is an instance here where there could be a travel time savings by using these routes, given the locally posted speed limits, and then based on the speed limits on the arterial surrounding it and the signal delays that would be factored in. It's simply hey, there is a route here that cars could potentially save time. And based on that, there's a probability. We don't know. There was no number given to that probability.
But built into the requirements, if you just look at the strict requirements, there's a standard for that this does not meet, namely the speed limits and what the speed is. So, you know, I kind of can't get past some of those things, right? I mean, you know, why don't we just do it as a matter of course, for example? I mean, just let's put speed bumps everywhere, you know, I don't know.
Right, and that's why we're bringing it to the Traffic and Mobility Commission. There is a mechanism in our current program that identifies that exceptions can be made. We're presenting that as an exception based on the traffic analysis that was conducted, in addition to City Council's direction. And to remind the commissioners that there have been exceptions made. Estrella de Mar was also a street that did not meet the speed criteria. It had similar speeds. And it was presented to the Traffic and Mobility Commission as a possible exception into the program, and that exception was granted. So it's not the first time that an exception would be made for a given street or streets.
So are you saying that there was no, so I don't know what the scenario was, but what was that a scenario in which there was no data about that it was, this is probably the wrong way to put it, speculation that there might be a problem in the future, and so you marshaled what, you know, here, which is pretty proactive, let's say, going to the council and saying this could be a problem, and then going to the citizens saying we think this could be a problem, and then that marshals a lot of support for that. Is that kind of what happened in that case, or how did that work out, or what, or did people, was that organically brought to everybody's attention by citizens who complained about it? Because I think that's a different scenario.
Estrella de Mar was a different scenario. There was no future development to worry about. There was no talk of cut through traffic necessarily. We did the speed measurements. It was below the threshold. They did not accept those findings, asked for an exception in the program, which we granted and took it to the Traffic and Mobility Commission. I think it was sometime last year. Is that right, Lindy? I want to say.
Sounds about right.
Yeah,
A year or
and it
so
was
ago.
strictly a speeding issue, and it didn't meet the speed criteria. But because traffic calming is, like I said, a quality of life issue, and if it's community supported, I think that's why the exception was placed there, so that if a community supported traffic calming, we're not prohibiting traffic, we're not preventing access, we're simply trying to regulate the speed so that they don't exceed the speed limit significantly.
So what you're saying is, and to make sure I understand, in that scenario, there was already a problem, a speed problem noted by citizens, or?
Their perception of speed, yes. They thought there was a speeding problem. It did not meet our criteria, which is simply we measure critical speed, and that 32 miles per hour is, I don't want to say arbitrary, but it is arguable, and therefore, why 32? Why not 31? Why not 29? Why not 25? That's why exceptions were written into the traffic management program, so that arguments could be made for an exception.
But that's data in some sense. I mean, right? I mean, you know, so citizens complaining, you know, what reliability that has, I don't know, but at least it is something. I mean, but we just don't have that, right? We don't have anything now. We don't have data. And so anyway, thank you. I appreciate your complete answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fowler. Commissioner Hunter?
Yeah, it was kind of along the same lines as we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't yet exist, which is an interesting discussion. I guess Commissioner Fowler covered a whole lot of that. The one remaining question is, are we using our resources on a problem that doesn't exist yet, rather than using resources on other problems that we already do know exist? El Camino Real from College to Cana, other places like that. So that's my question.
John, Chair, Chair, may I add a little bit more information to what Mr. Kim has provided? As was mentioned earlier, there was a neighborhood meeting in November of 2019 to the community with regards to the construction of Poinsettia Lane across the area from Cassia to approximately Skimmer Court. And at that meeting, there were quite a few residents that had basically issued complaints with regards to existing cut-through traffic as well. That was very well voiced to Mr. Kim during the presentation. That was also discussed as part of that traffic analysis study that was presented. And so that's part of the data, if you will, Commissioner Fowler, that you're referencing, is that there were already complaints that were brought about with regards to existing conditions. But because on top of that was the traffic analysis that was provided for what will be happening after the Poinsettia Lane is constructed, and the consultant had addressed that this was an area of concern, the residents made a point of saying that their current existing traffic issues should be addressed, which will just get worse. And so that was the time that the discussion was made. It was, I just looked on the dates, it was December 2nd was when it was presented here to the Traffic and Mobility Commission, when the consultant LSA and Mr. Kim made the presentation. And subsequent to that, it was December 10th was when it was presented to City Council. So just a little bit more information with regards to the study.
Yeah, if you'll indulge just one comment. Is that me? Anyway, sorry. Right, but where were they cutting from too? I mean, there's a barrier there, so that you would have to, if you were cutting through, you'd have to go west on Poinsettia a couple of blocks maybe, and then you're stopped, and then you'd have to decide to cut through to Dove Library or the
well, just jumping in, they're saying trying to resolve a problem they already have. The data that was just presented shows that they don't have a problem. It's 25 to 27 miles per hour. And so it's the standard, everybody believes that everybody goes too fast in their own neighborhood. So we're not solving a problem that already exists according to the data, which is Commissioner Fowler's point. So we're thinking ahead. We're not solving a problem that does exist, regardless of what the residents currently say. You know, the data shows that there isn't a problem. Is that what you were trying to say, Bill, right?
Let's give Commissioner Linke a chance to make his comments or questions.
Thank you. And welcome to Miriam, to the team first. I think Commissioners Fowler and Hunter have legitimate questions, although I'm inclined to support it given given all the data. Since the LSA study seems to support the fact that it could increase some cut-through traffic, and my rationale for it mainly is that these are just local neighborhood streets. If they were proposing calming on busier streets that are supposed to be carrying traffic, I'd probably would not support it, but they're local streets. But the one question I have is there were, I think, 15 or 17 residents who opposed the projects. So sometimes we see like 92% agreement. This time it was more like 80%. So I was curious if staff collected data on any of the rationale behind the people, the 17 or so people who oppose this project.
I haven't seen the surveys, but we do have written spaces for the public to write comments. Usually we refer to those if a public survey doesn't meet the criteria, and then we kind of dive into it to see if we could discern if we could reconfigure the alternative based on the comments given. But if it meets the criteria, we usually don't dig back into the comments on the survey sheets since it met the 50% criteria, the 67 support rate. But we do have access to those.
Even if it does meet the minimum threshold, it'd be interesting, I think, in the future to know what the ones who oppose it were, just to see what they are, because sometimes a minority view can be important to look at, even if it's in a minority. I don't have any comments beyond that. I do share some concerns that we're doing something before it's proven to be a problem, but as long as it's, I think to Commissioner Hunter's point, as long as this isn't taking resources away from another traffic calming program or other city street project where there's a demonstrated problem, and this one is jumping the line without knowing what it is, I'm inclined to support it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Linke. Commissioner Perez, you had a question.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I just wanted to understand, with these measuring of the speed, the average speeds in these points, was there any consideration, or was it anything within the neighborhoods that talked about like school drop-off? Because I believe it's, is it Aviara Oaks Middle School and Elementary School are located in that vicinity? And I believe that maybe there's something in there in regards to traffic. So there could be a cut through, say if anyone's coming from west of where the cutoff of Poinsettia is, or east of the cut point. So what I'm getting at is El Camino Real, I think Aviara, to get to the school, maybe there's some traffic or anything like that. My question is, was there any comments from the neighborhood or the community in regards to school traffic or anything like that?
So during the neighborhood meeting, a resident did express their concern because it's a new development. So their concern is that there are going to be more residents in that area, more kids. So one of the reasons they support the traffic calming is to discourage that cut through when the parents take their kids to school. And they would rather have the parent take Poinsettia Lane into El Camino. Poinsettia Lane into El Camino and Aviara Parkway.
Okay.
So there was concern of increased parents cutting through.
But okay, all right, thank you.
What is the time frame of the, if you guys know, of the new development and the new speed traffic calming?
We're trying to get, if approved by the commission, trying to get the traffic calming in the ground prior to the opening of Poinsettia if possible. The last I've heard about the Poinsettia Lane construction is around October is when they're talking about Poinsettia being able to open to traffic. And so we're trying to get improvements prior to that if possible.
Okay, so it's not a significant time before that.
Can you clarify what you mean by significant?
I mean, we're not gonna do the traffic calming like, let's say 2 years before.
No,
Yeah.
it will be I would think, month.
Okay. Okay, do I have any other commissioner comments?
Yeah, follow up, Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Perez, and then we're gonna go to Commissioner Pincier, and then we're gonna go to Vice Chair Johnson.
So however this outcome goes about for this traffic calming, just so that I can understand, if this were to move forward, like, will this go up or down on, the prioritization of, say, any of the other traffic calmings that we've recommended? So, like, will this, because of the poinsettia construction to open up that new lane through, is that going to, will this change priorities, I guess is my question.
It won't change priorities, but it may, just by the fact that other projects are already in progress in terms of design, finalization of design. They're already in the process. This one has not yet started. In order to save some time, we're thinking about doing the design in-house, which could save some time there. And based on that, it may be ready to go to construction earlier than, say, plans that are being developed by consultants.
So and final thing is, like, so for instance, just as it popped into my head, I know we approved a for Harwick, I believe. So would that, like, say for instance, would that be bumped down? And again, I'm not trying to throw any fire into this, but I'm just trying to understand prioritization if this were to move forward.
No, we have sufficient staff to move projects forward, including Harwich, so we wouldn't have to replace one with the other. That one will move forward as fast as it can, and we have the staff to do it. It's just that based on the way this project could be designed, it might be a little bit quicker.
Thank you, Mr. Kim.
Okay, Commissioner Pincier, do you have a comment or a question?
Yes, excuse me. When this development is completed, I presume the question is, are the children that will live in that new area, will they be going to Aviara Elementary? Is it inside that school boundary?
I'm not sure. I assume so. It's very close to Aviara Oaks. It's almost, a few blocks away on Ambrosia. So I would assume so, but I don't have privy knowledge to the way Carlsbad Unified School District sets up their boundaries.
Okay. The other question would be then, is the developer going to use any of the open space behind the facility to provide a trail to the school areas, similar to what they did between Quarry Creek and Tamarack area for Hope Elementary?
I'm not aware of that proposed project. We could look into it for you, Commissioner Pinciers,
Okay.
to see what the conditions of approval for that project was in terms of trails. I don't have any knowledge of what that might be.
Okay. Well, basically, I'm in favor of going ahead with this for a number of reasons. One of them would be potentially a safe route to school for parents who want to avoid the same issues that we've heard from many, many times before by the parents along Tamarack by Valley Middle School and so on. So the other question I have is although you have the 85% indication of people going just a few miles an hour over the speed limit, do you have the maximum speed that was caught on those two streets when you did the speed survey?
I don't think we have access to that information at the time. Lindy, can you help me out on the type of data that we do have?
It does show the maximum and minimum speed. We don't have it right now, but we can provide that.
Okay. I guess when I hear that people feel that people are speeding in their neighborhood already, I mean, it doesn't take very many people to cause that perception. If just 15% of the people are driving at 35 or even a little bit less than that, that's going to impact their perception a lot more than, say, the 85% that stay reasonably close to the speed limit. And again, I think we've made exceptions before, and this certainly seems like a place where we should do that here.
Okay. Any other questions, Commissioner Pencia?
No.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes, I liked some of the comments that Commissioner Feller and Hunter brought up. They think of a valid point. And I understand that the residential traffic calming program does have exceptions. I'm a little hesitant of giving exceptions, especially I don't understand the curb extensions. How is that going to stop the cut-through traffic? And I can understand here, but what do you do in an area that you don't have room to add curb extensions? Because I don't think we need to start setting precedents on areas that don't meet our data-driven criteria.
Curb extensions were specifically brought up as a solution to cut through because unlike other traffic calming features, which are usually based on a straight segment, this affects the turn. And so we normally present traffic calming on a single roadway, and we're concerned about the through speed on a given roadway. This one is a combination of different streets, a route, so to speak, where potential cut through could occur on multiple streets. Curb extensions are a way to reduce the speed of the turn by making that radius tighter than the common 30, 35 foot radius that's there now. You would place a really small, tight radius of 15, 20 feet, and it takes a car to negotiate that tighter curb slower. And so by the basis of this being a multiple street route, curb extensions are more applicable to propose and would be appropriate for addressing cut through specifically.
Okay, well, I know that in my neighborhood, it has long been, we suffered tremendously through cut-through traffic because of the proximity to the beach. And our neighborhood is built in the 50s, and our streets are narrow. So I'm looking at, is this a precedent that you're going to set for future exception requests?
I don't think so. I mean, we treat every case that we're addressed with individually. Every street, every neighborhood we consider to be unique. So depending on the conditions of those neighborhoods, we'll address them as they individually need. I don't take this as a, well, you're going to do curb extensions here, you're going to be doing them everywhere. Like I said, most of our traffic calming is done on singular streets, and speed cushions, or not speed cushions, but bulb outs, curb extensions aren't as effective on a straight route. We wouldn't recommend them because we find that on a low volume street, Mid-block, if you put a curb extension, a car can go straight through without deflection. And so they're not as effective on a straight singular street situation. It's only when you consider a turn where it would be effective. And so based on that, it would limit our recommendation for
Okay,
curb
thank you.
extensions.
Okay. Are we ready to go, Commissioner Linky?
One more brief comment on the setting of a precedent. I share the same concern, but I would say in this case that we've got a traffic study. It's not real world data, it's a projection, but we've got a traffic study that projects that traffic times through that area will be less than if you take the main routes from Poinsettia to El Camino and other routes. And this Poinsettia lane gap closure is probably one of the last, other than the college extension, major project in Carlsbad. So I think in this case, we can say that we're not setting a precedent because we're only doing it because there's a major road project, and maybe we would do the same thing with the college extension. But after that, I think there'll be no more projects in Carlsbad that would fall under this sort of an exception. So I don't know if that persuades anybody to vote in favor.
Would you like to make a motion?
No, I'll let somebody else make the motion.
Okay. Who wants to make a motion?
I'll move that we accept the staff recommendation to provide these traffic calming measures on the streets that have been proposed for.
Okay, do I get a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Commissioner Pensier made the comment, so they made the motion to approve staff recommendation, and Commissioner Hunter seconded. Can we go for a vote?
Commissioner Perez,
Yay.
Commissioner Linky,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
No.
Commissioner Pensiers,
Yes.
Vice Chair Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Vice Chair Johnson,
No,
Chair Goken.
Yes. Note that it passed 5-2 with Commissioner Fowler and Commissioner Johnson not voting for it. I did not ask Nathan, did we have any comments? I keep going, but do we have any public comments on any of these items?
Not this item, and yeah, no additional items on the agenda have public comments.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure that I keep that in mind. Okay, next we're going to move on to item 5, the semi-annual transportation report.
Oh, I think we've skipped over one.
Oh, I did.
Yep.
Oh, we're still, I was hoping we're going to be farther along in this. Thank you, Nathan.